Let's talk about tubbing axolotls. Whether you want to get into rescuing, breeding, or just keeping them as pets, you're probably going to need to know this at some point. Yes, it's pretty much how it sounds. Scrub-a-dub-dub, we're putting axolotls in tubs. Not your bathtub. A Tupperware tub. So there's a few reasons why you might need to tub your axolotl, and the most common ones come down to needing to cycle or recycle your aquarium, and the axolotl needing somewhere safe to go while you do that. They can be used to separate your axolotl from the aquarium to treat it for an injury or illness, since a lot of medications will affect your aquarium's nitrogen cycle, and you can use less of it with a smaller water volume. If you have multiple axolotls, this will also make it easier to quarantine them if one of them has an issue. If you have to move, tubbing can also be a good way of bringing your axolotl with you, but if you're going any more than a couple hours, there are better ways to do it, and I'll make a video on that too eventually. And for breeders, it can be a lot easier to work with baby axolotls in a tub rather than in a tank. It's usually meant to be a temporary setup while you get your situation figured out, but there are some people who successfully use tubbing as their long-term setup. Personally, I wouldn't suggest that though, because there are some cons to tubbing that you won't want to be dealing with long-term. Most of these cons come directly from the amount of maintenance you're going to need to do to keep up with a tub. So, are you really going to want to do multiple 100% water changes on a tub every single day for up to 15 years or more? So even if you're okay with the work, most axolotls will not be happy being moved over and over like that, and it's very common for tubbed axolotls to completely lose their appetites. Also, since it's just a tub of water with no filter, the ammonia is going to rise very fast, and unless you're keeping an eye on that, it can cause more of an issue than most of the things you'll be tubbing your axolotl for in the first place. Otherwise, they're a really safe, portable, and cheap emergency setup option as long as you know how to do it properly, which I'm about to show you here. For supplies, you're going to need 2 or more rectangular plastic tubs with lids, and you're going to want them in a food-grade plastic because you don't want any chemicals leaking into your water. The size of tub you'll need will depend on what you're using it for. So if you're using it for any sort of treatment, you can get away with smaller ones around the size of an adult's shoebox size. And for anything longer term, I would use something a bit larger like Walmart storage totes. Basically, you just want something big enough for the axolotl to fully stretch out and move around comfortably, but you don't want it so big that you can't physically pick up the tub. As usual, you'll need to keep your axolotl between 60 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit consistently, so you'll need a cool, dark place to keep the tub, or at least a fan to blow over it to keep it at this temperature. People will recommend adding frozen water bottles to the tub to bring the temperature down, but I find that this stresses axolotls out even more than just the tubbing process on its own, because of the fluctuations in temperature they have to go through. So you'll also need an aquarium thermometer to keep an eye on what the temperature's at. You'll need a water conditioner to make the tub water safe for your axolotl. So I like Chem Prime. You can just add 2 to 3 drops per gallon, and that will clear up any chlorine or ammonia, anything in that water that you don't want to be putting your axolotl in. And it's supposed to keep those water conditions safe for 24 hours. I would still recommend doing 100% water changes every 12 hours though, just because a single poop can make that ammonia rise really fast. So you're also going to want an ammonia test kit so that you can keep an eye on where it's at. And turkey basters. If you do see a single poop just hanging out there, it's most advisable to just change all of that water, but if you literally just did and you find a poop, you can just kind of suck it out there with the turkey baster. To move your axolotl from the tank to the tub or tub to tub, you're also going to want a net or a smaller container to corral them in. I prefer a smaller container rather than a net just because nets can kind of mess with their gills. Optional things you might need or want would be the medication or solution that you're using to treat whatever issue it is, if that's what you're doing. Some of those solutions will cause there to be less oxygen in the water, so in those cases, I would add a bubbler. Since tubbing can be a stressful experience for axolotls, it can help them to add a hide or some floating plants or almond leaves for them to hide under too. Okay, so first you'll need at least 2 food-grade plastic tubs, and the size will depend on what you're doing with them. So these, for example, are perfect for doing any sort of bath treatment type situation where they're only going to be in there for up to a couple hours to a day. I have these filled with about a gallon of water. For any situations where they're going to be tubbed for more than a few days or longer, like if you're cycling your tank, I would suggest something a little bit larger like this. If you're going to be adding a solution to treat your axolotl for something, I would recommend just filling it up so that the water line is about 2 inches above your axolotl's head. This will allow you to use less of your solution or medication. If you're not going to be treating for anything, you can fill that up a bit more, give them some more space, but in either case, don't forget a lid. You don't need to seal it on there, but you do want something to protect them from jumping out. Fill up both of your tubs at the same time, and then take your Axolotl safe water conditioner of your choice. I use Prime, it's 2 drops per gallon, and treat your water. Try to find a dark, cool, and low traffic area of your house to do this in. If you've got a basement, that would be perfect. Somewhere where the room temperature alone, or with the addition of a fan, can keep the water between 60 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't where I usually do it, but for the sake of lighting, this is where we're doing it today. And to keep an eye on that, you're going to need thermometers too. Now your tap water might come out at the temperature that you're planning on tubbing them at, but if not, you're going to want to let them sit until they come to that temperature. You want the temperature of the water it's going into to always match the water it was coming from. Once your tubs have come to temp, you can move your axolotl in using a net or a smaller container. Take a note from all the dropped axolotls, you don't want to use your hands. They are very slimy and shockingly strong. It's much easier to just corral them in something and walk them with that. Now it's going to be a tight squeeze, but we're going to use my big girl Spinelli to demonstrate. Okay. So you're going to take it to the tub and just lightly tip her in there, or him. There you go. And now you've got a tubbed axolotl. Now at this point, you can add any medications or solutions if you're going to be using them and follow those directions. Now after about 12 to 24 hours, you're going to need to do a water change, and that's when this tub comes in handy, which is already set up and to temperature. I would still recommend using the separate container to move the axolotl into the other tub, so same kind of thing. Scoop it in like this, pretend she's in there, and then move that to the next one. But instead of dumping all of that water in here, you're going to kind of cradle under and move her in, and then dump that water out when you dump out the rest of the old tub. Now, despite some actually liking being touched like Spinelli here, you don't really want to touch axolotls too much, so don't actually grab them, just lift them. I'm filming with one hand, so I can't do the bowl thing right now, but just pretend she's in a bowl. I'm talking like this. Lift and doom. Most axolotls will not be that chill, but in a bowl it should be about that easy. Now that it's been moved, you can go and dump your old tub and refill it with fresh water and set it right back here to come to temperature for the next water change. And just keep going like that. Like I said, if you're going to be doing any sort of treatment with a medication or something, your tub situation might look a little bit different than this. Your tubs might be a bit bigger. They might have an air stone added. I'll be posting videos about different treatments you can do while tubbing, so you'll see other tubbing situations, but this is the most basic one for now. Hi, Spinelli. Don't just ignore them for that 12 to 24 hours though. Be checking in on them, because if there's any little poops, you're going to want to catch them. Try to align your feeding times with their tub change time too, because if you can feed them right before you change the tub, that can save some of the water quality for you. It's a good idea to test that ammonia in between water changes just to make sure that you are doing them at the right time, but in general, 12 to 24 hours will be the time to do a water change. Some will be more and some will be less though. So if you do start coming across some issues while you're tubbing, I would check that ammonia. If you don't know how to use a water test kit, I have a video explaining that on my account. It should be labeled the nitrogen cycle. And that's basically it. That's how and why you might need to tub an axolotl. I just wanted to add a couple little things to keep in mind too though. Make sure your tub is clean and free of any chemicals or anything that might be left in it from using other things. It's better to just buy a brand new tub for this stuff. Same with your hands. Always, before sticking your hands in any sort of aquarium, make sure you don't have any smelly soaps or anything on them. Be really careful not to overfeed axolotls when they're being tubbed as well, because if they regurgitate it, those worms will go bad way faster than in a tank, and a bad worm and the smell that they put off could turn axolotls off of worms, sometimes forever. And finally, keep an eye on your tank. Don't forget about it. You don't want your cycle to crash just because you've been so focused on a tub. So if you only have one axolotl and it's not in the tank, you're going to need to be adding some ammonia to keep that cycle going, or else your axolotl is going to end up good and ready to move back into its tank, and the tank isn't going to be ready anymore. It's going to have to spend more time in the tub while you get that figured out. So just, don't forget about the tank. This is why most people suggest to have your aquarium fully cycled before getting the axolotl, or really any aquatic pet, because the cycling process can be quite the learning curve, and you don't want to also have to be tubbing an axolotl and doing daily water changes on that on top of learning. But as we know, things can happen, cycles can crash, and being able to tub can be a real lifesaver in those situations and many others. That's why I keep axolotl tubbing supplies at the top of my list in my axolotl emergency kit, and I think you should too.